Game Night was directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, who would later go on to direct Dungeons & Dragons, and it stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams as Max and Annie, an ultra-competitive married couple who frequently engage in various contests with their friends. First is the sharp, self-aware humor. The script, written by John Francis Daly, Jonathan Goldstein, and Mark Perez, crackles with clever and absurd wit. Now, Plemons is an incredible actor, and he is able to take a role that could have been incredibly goofy and lame and turn it into something great. Gary is definitely a socially awkward individual, and he does say some pretty odd things during the course of the movie. And there's a fantastic synth-heavy score by While Watching Game Night. I found myself laughing out loud on the edge of my seat. Genuinely invested in the characters, the energy of the movie barrels forward. It's fun, it's clever, it's well acted, and it's endlessly. The only minor flaws I could find are that a few of the plot conveniences felt rushed in the third act, and not every side character lands equally. But honestly, by the time the post-credit scene rolled around, I had already forgiven it for everything. Game Night is a comedy thriller that successfully balances its two genres. It's smart, it's funny, and it proves that studio comedies aren't always the mindless garbage we think they are. With Game Night, you get the best of both worlds, a smart comedy and a solid thriller. At one point, he asks, "Annie, are you okay?" And she responds, "I'm fine." And Gary follows up by saying, "You sound fine, but do you feel fine?" And after she tells him to leave her alone, he says, "Okay, but if you don't feel fine, call me." But what makes Plemons' delivery so brilliant here is that he doesn't make Gary cringingly awkward. Instead, he plays him with such a straight face that the awkwardness comes across as even funnier. Another great example of Plemons' comedic genius is when the gang visits a casino owned by the father of one of the female players. And the group sits down at a poker table, and Max accuses Gary of cheating. Gary responds, "I'm not cheating, I'm not even good at poker." But Max insists that he is cheating and that he must have gotten his money from selling drugs. Gary looks at Max, deadpan, and says, "No, I got this from a rich lady. She gave it to me because she liked me. I don't sell drugs." After everyone else leaves, Gary looks at Max and says, "How can that be profitable for Frito-Lay? Perfection?" By far one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. Whether it is a joke about Monopoly money being Monopoly on the game board, or a joke about a pregnant woman being unable to play, or a joke about a guy pretending to be injured. And directors John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein excel at keeping the laughs and the thrills evenly balanced. There's a single-take action sequence that takes place in and around a mansion, and it's brilliantly edited and shot in moves from room to room, and the comedy hits hard and fast. Meanwhile, the action keeps you engaged. The chase ends with Max and Annie teaming up to take out several henchmen in the most absurd way possible, by crashing a party hosted by Denzel Washington and his wife. And the movie has a fantastically absurd MacGuffin, in the form of an egg, and it's stolen by a villain whose motives are unclear until late in the film. Plus, the final twist is one that I did not see coming. There are plenty of great comedic actors in this movie, but shout out to Kyle Chandler, who plays a detective. He plays it perfectly straight, even when the situation becomes more and more ridiculous. And he has great comedic timing. For instance, at one point, he pulls Max aside and warns him that the case could go south if Max continues to get in his way, and he emphasizes the word south as much as humanly possible. It's such a silly, stupid joke, but it's executed perfectly, and it kills me every time. These jokes land solidly thanks to fantastic comedic timing from the actors. Of all the duos in the movie, though, none have better chemistry than McAdams and Bateman. They have been together in several movies now, and there's always something very comforting about seeing them on screen together. Max and Annie might seem like your standard married couple at first glance, but the movie peels back the layers and shows us that even the most stable relationships can have their share of problems, and their love for each other is constantly tested throughout the course of the film. When Annie is trying to figure out how to remove a bullet from someone, she naturally Googles it on her phone. And Max, clearly irritated by his wife's incompetence, "I think we should ask Gary. He seems to know a lot about bullets." Later on, Max tries to impress some people by explaining that he and Annie were going to get a divorce, but she stopped him because she didn't want to hurt their kids. And Annie retorts by saying that he was going to divorce her because she would unstop nagging him. So yeah, even when they are being incompetent or horrible to each other, they still manage to make it funny. That's part of the reason why Game Night works so well. It's actually a very sharp and self-aware movie. It knows how to balance the ridiculous scenarios with genuine character development. And there are some nice little plot threads that carry over. Like early in the movie, Max tells Annie that she'll go and trust Gary because he is weird and he has just been released from prison. And sure enough, it turns out that Gary was actually the one who kidnapped Max's brother. But there's another moment that I feel is worth highlighting. In fact, it's one of my favorite moments in the entire film. Annie and Max have gotten separated from the group and they are desperately trying to find them. And Max is, of course, looking for a way to win the game. And he spots what appears to be a roadblock, but he says, "Actually, that might be our best chance," implying that he plans to drive around the roadblock. To which Annie responds, "We're not racing, Max, followed by the line, "You know what? We're not racing. We're searching for our friends." So even when the movie does become more serious, they never completely abandon the game aspect of the story. And on this particular evening, they are playing a murder mystery themed game called Murder in Suburbia. There's also a guy named Gary, played by Jesse Plemons, who is awkwardly trying to join in on the fun, but he is struggling because he was just recently dumped by one of the other women at the game night. Things get pretty heated, but then the doorbell rings and standing outside is a masked man holding a blooded meat cleaver, and he announces that he has kidnapped the brother of one of the players, and unless they can follow a series of cryptic clues and solve the mystery, then said brother will be killed. Everyone thinks it's a really elaborate prank orchestrated by Ryan Reynolds, but what if it's not? No one can be certain, which adds a layer of legitimate concern, and the game goes on. So why does Game Night work so well? Why did it make my top 10 of 2018? Well, let me count the reasons. Reason No. 2. Why Game Night works so well is that Jesse Plemons steals every scene he is in. This is a fun little action comedy. The directors make some interesting overhead shots that turn the suburbs into a game board. The next reason why Game Night works is the thriller mechanics, comedy heart. And lastly, Game Night is surprisingly stylish. And that is why I give Game Night a final score of 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching. If you are not already subscribed, please give me a like and do so. It really helps and is much appreciated.